Hello, I'm Oliver Colling, and this is my 70s TV childhood. Hello again, and welcome back to my 70s TV childhood. The finest, if not the only podcast about growing up in the UK during the 1970s, and the vital role that television played in our childhoods, and in our families at that time. If you're new to the podcast, then a very special welcome to you. We've been going for around 4 years now, and we have over 100 episodes in our back catalogue, covering all sorts of childhood 70s memories, and a very wide range of our and our listeners' favourite television programmes from throughout the 1970s. If you are a regular listener, then thanks for your support. It means the world to us. Thanks to all of you who've been in touch via our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com or through our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter/X, YouTube and LinkedIn. We love hearing from you and the memories that you have of growing up in the 1970s, and it's so moving to hear how the podcast has helped you remember happy times. As well as the methods above, you can also email oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. And I'd like to give a special mention to David, who sent me an email recently to say that our podcast had helped him following his mother passing away by reminding him of happy, carefree childhood days, followed by going home to see what Mum had conjured up for tea. I'm so sorry for your loss, David, but really moved that we've helped you a little at what must be a very difficult time for you and your family. Another one of our regular listeners, Sue, got in touch a few months ago asking whether there was any chance of an episode on Basil Brush. Well, Sue, it's been a long wait, but our listeners' wishes are our command. And this episode is the one you've been waiting for. Basil Brush was unique. I'm not sure there has ever been a performer so loved by families of a certain age, and certainly not one who isn't actually real. Okay, apologies. I guess in today's times I should have issued a trigger warning ahead of that statement, but I have to tell those of you who may not have realised it that, okay, sorry for this, but Basil Brush was, well, a puppet. But he was also a lot more than that. He was a huge personality. Probably only Sooty and Sweep could compare to him in terms of puppets with a huge following, but I think Basil had an edge on Sooty, as he was such a huge presence that you never thought of him as anything other than a fox. Well, that was my view anyway. Basil was there on Saturday early evening TV from my earliest memories. We mentioned quite a lot about Saturday evening TV in previous episodes of the podcast, and for me, it was one of the few times during the week when we sat down to watch television together as a family. Basil Brush was a firm family favourite, and particularly loved by my mother. For those of you who don't remember, Basil was, well, as we mentioned, a fox, who normally appeared dressed in a very natty set of tweeds, including a tweed riding cloak, which was rather iconic given that he was probably the main prey of any hunters, whose dress he copied. But as well as being a fox, he was a huge character. He spoke with a rather upper-class accent and was a cheeky, mischievous performer who could be a bit naughty from time to time and was also a fantastic storyteller. He was really very expressive with a large, fine tail. It's called a brush, he often used to explain to us, and an expressive head which he used to rub up against his co-stars. Given he never actually moved from the spot he was sitting in, he did have a remarkable range of expression, and I'll never forget his brush wagging from side to side whenever he was happy. But how did this fox become a national treasure? We need to go back into the 60s, well, to 1962 specifically, when Peter Firmin, yes, he of Noggin the Nog, Clangers and Bagpuss fame, created a fox glove puppet for a show called the Three Scampiesto, which was about a travelling circus act. The character became very popular, and as a result, Basil Brush's next gig was a sidekick to the great TV magician David Nixon.
You want them short? Yes, nice and short. I see. You'll make them more cuts than Mr. Wilson.
Right, I've done it, Basil.
Now, put the knot in your mouth.
In your mouth?
Yes, yes.
All right, get hold of it. Got it?
Yes.
Right. All right, got it? What are you doing?
Yes,
Huh?
I'm doing the trick. There we are.
Hey, funny.
Basil and David Nixon made a great team, but it's rumoured that whilst David loved working with Basil and loved Basil himself, he felt that he was constantly being upstaged by him. So what was the answer? Well, in 1968, the BBC launched the Basil Brush Show, and Basil's place as a Saturday tea time icon was assured. Now, some of you may be thinking I'm going a bit far just talking about Basil like he was a person in his own right, but that was the way it appeared to me, and this was largely down to the man who brought Basil to life as both puppeteer and voice to the cheeky fox, Ivan Owen. You may not have heard the name Ivan Owen before, but that was all part of his plan. He kept a very low-key presence in showbiz because he wanted to reinforce the impression that Basil was real. Even at the height of Basil's fame in the 1970s, Ivan never gave television interviews or allowed himself to be photographed because, in his words, he didn't want to break the spell. Of course, Basil's character and voice were those of Ivan Owen, and he was so much larger than life that none of us watching had any trouble in suspending our disbelief. It's rumoured that Basil's voice was modelled on Terry Thomas, and whilst there are similarities, for me, Basil's voice, wit and character were all his own. The key to the success of the TV show was Basil's sidekick. He had a succession of companions who helped him out in a sort of friendly parental way, and the chemistry between Basil and his companions was a central part of the show's popularity. When the show began in 1968, Basil's first companion was none other than Rodney Bewes, known as Mr. Rodney. Before he handed over to the first of Basil's friends, I remember, Derek Folds, or Mr. Derek, as we all knew him better. The chemistry between the two was touching, as in this excerpt from 1970.
A special announcement to all of our viewers who only watch afternoon shows now and then. You'd better switch on if you haven't yet done so, because Basil is back on the telly again.
Thank you very much. Well, hello and welcome to the show, where we've got a marvellous audience in the theatre today. And to prove it, listen. Is everybody happy? Fantastic. Well, I'm sure you all know that Basil is very fond of reading.
Oh, what a load of old rubbish that is.
But I've never known him...
I'm having that one out for a start.
I've never known him spend so much time with his books as he has this week.
There's a load of old codswallop, that book.
Basil!
I'm not giving that out.
Basil!
What is it?
Don't do that now, please.
Well, I won't be long. I'm just sorting this little lot out. Now, let's have a look. I don't want that one. I don't want that one. God.
What are you doing with your books?
Oh, I'm having a sort out, Mr. Derek. Did you read in the papers about that lady librarian in Ipswich last week?
Oh, you mean the lady in the public library who said that the Billy Bunter stories were unfit for children?
Yes, that's her. Well, you know, she may be right. I mean, some of these children's books are not very nice publications, you know. So I'm getting rid of the bad ones.
Well, I didn't know you had any bad ones.
Well, neither did I till I examined them. I mean, look at that one down there.
This one?
Yes.
What, Winnie the Pooh? What's wrong with that?
Well, it's not a very nice word, is it?
What? Winnie?
No. The other word. I don't mind pong, but that's a bit strong.
Oh, Pooh, Basil.
Oh, you said it again. Oh. You'll have Mrs. Lighthouse after you.
Look, I think you're going a bit too far.
Huh?
Look, you're not turning this one out, are you?
I certainly am.
What, The Adventures of Rupert Bear?
Oh, doesn't bear thinking about, does it? I mean, imagine Rupert running around in his birthday suit. And his bare feet. And that one's even worse. Nuddy in Toyland.
Well, that's Noddy in Toyland.
Well, it's still not in very good taste. I mean, there's a poor little chap in that book, Noddy keeps calling Big Ears. I mean, you wouldn't like anybody to call you Big Ears, would you? Even if you have. He has got big ears, though, hasn't he? Yes, from the back. He looks like a taxi with the doors wide open.
In a much later interview, Derek Foles touched on his special relationship with Basil.
They asked me to do another series, and I hummed and hawed and thought, oh, God. And I had 2 young boys. And I went back, and it was that second series that something quite strange and magical happened. I put my arm around a bit of fur, and it became a tail. And I looked into these buttons, and they became eyes. And Basil Brush became my best pal. And when I left 5 years later, I had withdrawal symptoms. I really missed him. We did 8 series together and 2 Royal Command performances.
Amazing.
And if you believe that, you believe that is true. That is absolutely true. I so love that show. And the kids, and it's the closest I've ever been to being a sex symbol.
Who's talking about puppets now, eh? After Mr. Derek came the man I most fondly remember as Basil's straight man, Mr. Roy, real name Roy North. Mr. Roy and Basil had a brilliant on-screen presence, and he was never fazed by Basil's one-liners and interjections, and appeared to have genuine affection for the little fox. They worked so well together that the government even used them in public information films, a subject we returned to recently on this podcast.
Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like... I say, Mr. Roy, what have you got there, right?
It's an inflatable canoe. I'm blowing it up.
Blowing it up? What harm has it done you? Put it down.
You're blowing air into it, you nut.
Oh, I beg your ever so pudding. It's a bit small for you, isn't it?
It's yours.
Huh?
I thought you might fancy a jolly joust with the waves.
Jolly... You're not getting me out in that. Oh, I get salt in my fur. And the waves, I mean to say, tip me up, turn me over.
You'll get your tail wet.
Brush, please. You might brush.
All right, well, if you're staying here, I'm going to borrow a rubber dinghy.
Huh?
And if I get beyond the wave,
Beyond the wave?
I can have a nice
A
swim.
nice swim? You really... Lifeguard!
What's the matter?
If you swim away from a rubber dinghy, it could be swept away from you.
Oh, I see. And there I'll be,
Where?
all at sea. Boom, boom.
I do the jukes.
All right, then. I'll go and have a nice peaceful float on my airbed.
Just a minute, hang about.
What?
I'll tell you something.
Yeah?
Imagine, there I am, lying on my airbed, floating gently up and down. Suddenly I raise my head.
What do you see?
That's right,
What?
the sea.
That's my
You
joke.
can have it. It wasn't very funny anyway. Water. No beach. The wind and tide have carried me out. Help! Help!
Are you trying to tell me that inflatables are dangerous?
Dangerous? Now did I see this?
Ah, you mean inflatables are safe if they're used properly.
You to the top of the class. But don't go out on open water when the wind and tide can sweep you out.
And don't be tempted to go for a nice swim.
Wait, who's giving this information? That's right. And don't go out where there are waves to tip you up.
So what are you going to do then?
I thought I might potter over to the paddling pool and play with Horace.
Who's Horace?
My rubber duck. Come on, Horace! Horace! You can't stand water, you know.
The format of the show was pretty similar from what I remember week to week. Typically, it would open with Basil and his companion having a little chat with jokes and comment. I seem to remember that some of this used to be very topical, and that Mr. Wilson and Mr. Heath came in for plenty of attention from the razor-like wit of Basil. We then have a comedy sketch based on Basil and his companion being in a situation like being in a shop, or in a ski lodge, or on an aeroplane, or marooned on a desert island.
Now, ever since Sir Alec Rose circumnavigated the globe, it's been Basil's ambition to sail around the world. And after the last series, he bought a boat and persuaded me to go with him. I should have known better.
in the sun. We're castaways, Mr. Derek and me. Our poor old boat wouldn't stay afloat. It's now at the bottom of the deep blue sea. This is the life. But my goodness, it's warm. Oh, I feel like a hot potato sitting here baked in my jacket. Oh, hello, Mr. Derek. Do you have any luck?
Well, I only caught one, Basil.
Oh.
I think it's a mackerel.
Well, one of these days you'll catch two, and that'll be a miracle. Hey, that's not a mackerel. No, that's a very unusual fish called a dock.
Well, what's a dock?
It's a sort of confused cod. It swims backwards to keep the water out of its eyes.
I'm fed up with fish.
Huh?
We've been marooned on this island for 5 weeks with nothing to eat but fish.
Yeah, and not a chip in sight.
Poor old Mr. Derek. Given how popular Basil was during the 70s, we'd also have a special musical guest, and top singing artists of the time were queuing up to perform alongside Basil. So we had the likes of Petula Clark or Cilla Black would come on and do their best not to be upstaged by their foxy companion. Here's Basil in 1977 with the UK's favourite Greek singer.
Listen, you know something? You should come to Greece.
May I stay for more than one day?
Basil, you can stay as long as you like.
Oh!
Eternally. Ever and ever,
Oh!
forever and ever, you'll be the one. I'll welcome you like the morning sun.
I hear your weather is better than ever. It's always spring. The sun's as high as the soul to see.
I'll take you far beyond imagination.
Oh, the dream come true. I'll have a vacation.
Ever and ever, forever and ever, my guest you'll be.
I'll come with you, but what will I see?
You'll see a lot of things.
Really?
I'll tell you with the music.
Come on, tell me.
The sun.
Yes.
The sea.
Yes.
Beautiful scenery.
I like it.
There's a song.
Yes.
Everywhere. Romance. You can feel in the air.
How I wish I was there
Of course. Tell me now.
to hear
What?
guitars playing beneath the stars.
They serve the wine and food.
I can feel it on my lips. That was soccer and chips.
Sorry, Nana Muscuri fans, but it just had to be Demis Roussos in 1977. And the singers weren't allowed to just sing most of the time. No, they had to do a bit of acting as well. Here's Lulu on the show in 1976.
That's my life.
Oh, you know I was only kidding.
I know you are, Miss Lulu. You know, I tried to do a bit of pop singing on my show.
Did you?
Do you know what a television critic wrote about me?
No.
He said, Basil Brush, once seen, never remembered.
But you know, some critics can be very nice to newcomers just starting in show business.
Oh, yes.
I remember when I first started, Basil,
Yeah.
I was thrilled when a critic said, Lulu's voice comes out very well.
And it should. Look where it's been.
But you know something? If you want to get noticed,
Yeah.
what you need is a gimmick.
What sort of gimmick?
Well, Gilbert O'Sullivan started with a cloth cap and braces.
Nothing else?
Of course he was something else.
Oh, yeah.
And then Elton John had enormous glasses.
Oh, I bought a pair of glasses just like Elton John's.
Did you?
The glasses were bigger than I was. When I put them on, I made a spectacle of myself.
You know it.
Back to the show. And after the musical number and sketch with a hapless celebrity singer, we would normally end with story time, where Mr. Derek or Mr. Roy would read a story from a big storybook about one of Basil's ancestors or a distant relative. So we heard tales of Basil the Farmer, a knight at the time of Robin Hood, Blast Off Basil, his space-travelling relative, Now, if you remember, as we mentioned before, space was massive in the 1970s. Quite often we'd hear about Bulldog Basil, Special Agent.
Time once again for another thrilling episode in our serial story, Bulldog Basil, Secret Service Man. Ready for this week's installment, Basil?
Yes, I'm listening.
Basil learned that he was a colonel who commanded a regiment of Indians.
Any cowboy?
Of course there weren't any cowboys. He was in the Indian army.
Oh.
And had lost an eye in a skirmish in the Khyber Pass.
You know that colonel we met in the country last week?
Oh, you mean Colonel Bagshot Frimley?
Yes, he's got a glass eye, you know.
Really? Did he tell you?
Not exactly. It came out in the conversation.
At the ship's dance on the previous evening, Basil had met the Colonel's wife in the gentleman's excuse me.
What was she doing in there?
The gentleman's excuse me is a dance.
Oh, I beg your ever so pudding.
She was the perfect example of a mensab in the Raj,
Yeah.
typically British.
My landlady's typically British. She looks like John Bull.
Don't be rude.
I wasn't being rude.
And the lady had told Basil that she was a direct descendant of General Lord Clive, one of the foremost conquerors of India.
Now, there's a coincidence.
What?
I'm one of the foremost conquerors of Shepherd's Bush.
Yeah?
That's my champion conquer there.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's a 29er.
A 29er?
Yes.
That's very good, but just a minute.
What?
I've got one here.
Huh?
36er.
A 36er?
That's right.
Wow! Whoa. Would you like to become a member of the BBCC,
What's the BBCC?
the Basil Brush Conquer Club?
All
You have
right,
to
then.
play me first. You have to play me first. And if I beat your 36er, my 29er will become a heck of a lot of her, won't it?
Right, you're on then.
All right, but now, mind where you're hitting. You could knock my little bonds off, you know.
All right.
Right. Round the wrong
Chin
way.
up.
Look what you've done. You've disintegrated my 29er. I've nurtured that conker since last year. I harvested that conker with my own two little paws. I soaked it in olive oil, pickled it in vinegar, baked it in the oven. Now look at it. I wonder what it tastes like.
Do you know, listening back to that segment for the first time in about half a century, I'd forgotten how clever Basil Brush was. The interruptions, the one-liners and tangents, combined with Basil's childlike enthusiasm to hear the story, made these stories a real highlight of the show, which provided something for the adults as well as the children watching. I'd also forgotten about Tika, Basil's little clockwork dog, which would often be involved in putting off the storyteller, and also amusing Basil with some tricks. I had a clockwork dog a bit like Tika, as I'm sure many of you did, but we weren't half as funny as Basil and Tika. The story would always end on an exciting cliffhanger, and Mr. Derrick or Mr. Roy would say, "And that's all we have time for this week, Basil," at which point Basil would protest vehemently that we wanted to hear more. We'd end with a song from Basil and his companion, and then settle down as the credits rolled, and we got ready in our seats for whatever was coming next, probably Doctor Who, which often followed on from Basil Brush. The Basil Brush Show was a mainstay of the Saturday early evening schedules for over a decade. It was cancelled in 1980, allegedly after a dispute between Ivanhoe and the BBC. Owen wanted Basil to have a mid-evening time slot, given his broad appeal across all ages, but the BBC bigwigs disagreed, and Basil was put out to grass, or whatever you do with foxes. He did make a number of comebacks. In 1982, he was the host of Learn to Read with Basil Brush, taking over from Terry Hall and Lenny the Lion. And that's Terry Hall, not the lead singer of the specials of Funboy 3, but the ventriloquist who worked with Lenny the Lion. And then he briefly appeared on Crackerjack as a co-host during its declining years. Ivan Owen died in 2000, and the Basil Brush I remember so fondly died with him. However, Basil was reinvented for a new generation with a new, redesigned puppet and the voice of Michael Windsor. The new Basil was very successful for a while, but was squarely aimed at the younger children's TV market. and from what I understand became very childish and silly. Now, before anybody protests, I know that the original Basil could be very silly and quite childish, but I think there was a difference. The Basil Brush that I grew up with appealed to all the family, and the character provided by Ivor None was witty, clever, and, really funny. I have such happy memories of my mother laughing at Basil Brush, and indeed of us laughing along as a whole family on a Saturday afternoon, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Boom, boom! Basil Brush is a much cherished memory of my childhood. Do you remember the Basil Brush Show? And was my family the only one watching and laughing together on a Saturday tea time? Let me know by leaving a comment on our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com or on one of our many social media pages. You can also email me, oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. That's all for now, but before we go, I'd like to ask you a favour. If you have a moment, please rate, review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'd also ask you to tell your friends about us. We really appreciate your support. So we'll be back next week with the next edition of our quiz, the imaginatively titled The My 70s TV Childhood Quiz. And we'll return with our next regular podcast in a fortnight. So thanks for listening. Be nice to any foxes you may meet this week. And join us again soon for more from My 70s TV Childhood.